Hello math fans, continuing this series on derivatives, I'd like to just address preparing to use calculus. I think this is the main supplemental video some of my students need. This is a review sheet I hand out. This quarter I had my TAs handed out. It's exponent rules, but it's not really exponent rules. It's all the things you need to become a calculus student. And the things you need is an understanding of fractions and an understanding of exponents. So I find sometimes people have holes here, and it's really hard to move forward if you have a hole. And so I'm going to talk about these things one by one. So first, let's talk fractions. And then I'll show a whole bunch of examples of just the very first step, and we're going to do nothing else here. So I find that the first few times I write this, it's a mystery for some students, and it shows it's just a missing background in your arithmetic understanding that this is the same as 3 times a half, which is the same as a half times 3. I've seen people give me funny looks about that. It's all 1.5, however you want to slice it. I think the issue is that sometimes in cookbooks you see 3 1/2 cups of flour. That's my guess, but that is not the same as this. Not equal. This means 3 plus a half. You do 3 scoops and a half. It's not the same as times. Some students say they blindly learned a rule long ago that says multiply the tops and bottoms, which is fine. But I think that also shows a little bit of misunderstanding that yes, we can write this as 3 over 1, but there is no need. You've graduated past that. So when I see this, yes, I can just write 15 over 8, or I can think of it as there's a 1/2 there, and there's a 1/4 there, and there's a 3, and there's a 5. So it is helpful to think about division as multiplying by a fraction, and then rearrange it however you like. So what I'm saying is, in a lot of situations, we're going to have something like this. We're going to have 3x to the 5th over 2. And I've seen all sorts of crazy things, like the 2 suddenly appears in the exponent, or the 3. It's just a real lack of understanding. And what we really need to do is to write 3/2 times x to the 5th. It's that simple. But it requires you understand this idea about fractions, that that's the same, that you can regroup things. It's just a number sense thing. So you can go through several of these and adding fractions. I mean, I could spend a lot more time here, but I think it's fairly simple. And what I mean by that is your first job is to pull out the numbers. In a given term, those are coefficients. So when I look at this, I'm just going to jump straight down to the fraction part. There's going to be a 5 times 1 over x to the 5th. There's going to be a 9 times 1 over... This is from homework. And there's going to be an 8 square root of x. So all of these questions are like this. You pull out the coefficient, and I want to separate that. This coefficient's already in here. This one you could write as 1/3 times all the rest of the stuff. The square root of 8x minus 9 minus the square root of x. That's what I mean. This one you can write as 512. This is understanding that if you multiply by 512 out in front, it's no different than having 512 on top. This one, I would write, there's nothing to pull out here. You can't pull out the 3 because it's not attached to both. You could write 9/5 times. So I would call this number sense, understanding how fractions work. And there seems to be an uneasiness about this, and I'm just trying to do as many examples so that you can see that this is not bad. So step 1 is pull out your coefficients. This one would be 45. And once you get this down, you can do it in combination with other steps. When I see this one, I write 4 times 1 over x squared. I'm separating the coefficient from the variable. Same thing here. I'm going to write 3/8. So you should keep on trying this and seeing that you're getting the same thing. This is how fractions work. This is how numbers work. If I'm given this one, this is from an old test, I think this. I think in the middle of a test or elsewhere, people just lose and they just start randomly putting things together. Can't have that happen if you want to be successful. So step back and look at that. You can see how we're just pulling out the coefficients, pulling out the 3/8, pulling the coefficients, and just rewriting fractions. And that's what I mean when I'm saying it's really just understanding this, that those three things are the same, and getting comfortable using that. Okay, hope you try to see what I'm talking about. So that's going to be, the beginning of step 0, which is coefficients. Coefficients, pull out the coefficients. It's these things right here. Coefficients, pull out the coefficient. Coefficient meaning a number in front of a variable. And then you have your exponent rules. And I talk about how this is just straight up counting. X squared means x times x. X to the 4th means x times x times x times x. There's 6 of them, it's x to the 6th. So these are straight counting. So the only two special rules are these, which is if you give me 1 over x to the 5th, it's x to the negative 5th. Those are the same. Now that's something that you're supposed to have coming into this class, but even if you've forgotten it completely, it's not something that's scary. You can try typing some of these into your calculator if you haven't. Those are the same. So you need to know that piece. That's what this rule says right here. So in steps, let's do an example. If I had 3 over 2x to the 5th, you shouldn't be guessing at how it works. You should pull out the coefficient, step 1, rewriting the power, step 2. That ability just to work with variables and functions, it's a basic idea. Don't let that be the reason you don't do well in this course. Similarly, here's how roots work. So if I have a root of x, it's x to the 1 over n. That's what a root means. So the cube root of x is x to the 1/3. If you happen to have something else inside, x squared, we think of it as x squared to the 1/3, but you just multiply those things, x to the 2/3. So when you look at a root, you should think of it as a, if it's a 3, it's a 1/3 power. That's all from, anyone who's made it this far has seen this many, many times, but maybe you've forgotten. Now you really need it. That is it. So it's just these couple things. Understanding that you can pull out fractions and knowing these two facts. So if you know these 3 things, then you're set to go. So let's finish the story. So for each one of these old exam or homework questions that I grabbed, I'm just going to move this up here, get rid of some of the stuff I've been doing. Let's see if you can play this game. So step 1, we pulled out the coefficients. Step 2, we're going to write 5x to the negative 5, because that's what that is. We're going to write 9x to the negative 9, because that's what that is. And we're going to write x to the 1/2. This is just stuff we need to do automatically. This one we're going to write 8q to the 1/8 over 1 minus q. This one we're going to write 3x squared plus 6x plus 7 to the 1/2. This one we already pulled out the 1/3. We're going to write 8x minus 9 to the 1/2 minus x to the 1/2. This one we're going to write, so this is a kind of a 2-step thing. If you want to do it in 2 steps, 1 over p to the 1/2 minus 1, but that's the same thing as 512 p to the negative 1/2 minus 1. This one, what can we say? So we're going to say x squared plus 8 to the what power? 1/3. This is cube root. All over 3 minus x. I'm not talking about the next steps. Right now I'm just talking about step 0. pull out your coefficients, which we already did, and then write x squared plus 4 to the 1/2. Pull out your coefficient, which we already did, write x to the -1. Pull out your coefficients, which we already did, write x to the -2 plus 1/3 x squared. This is how you get a function ready so you can use calculus. This one we already pulled out our coefficients, x to the 1/3, x to the 7th minus 4x to the 3rd to the 1/2. Done. This one we've already pulled out our coefficients. So you can see this part is kind of, you can be just a robot and do this part automatically. Don't let this be the reason you're struggling. So if you need more practice with that, I made this review sheet. I didn't have to. Why do I make these review sheets? Sometimes I have to explain this to students. I don't get paid to make this review sheet. The reason I made it was to try to help you do better. So if you're struggling with this, use it. So let's play the game real quick. And if you want, you can play this on your own. You can find it in my review material. A calculus student needs to know how to rewrite those in an ugly way. So you can do calculus. You need to realize you pull out the 2, and then you write it x to the -7. You need to realize you pull out the 3rd, and then you write it as x to the 16. You need to realize you pull out the 5/4, and then you write it x to the 6th. You need to realize you pull out the 1/4, and then you write it as 1 over x squared, which is x to the -2. You need to realize this is 3, x to the 7/5. You need to realize this is x to the 1/2 times 2 minus x, which we probably want to expand out. You need to realize this is x to the 1/3 plus 4 squared, which we probably want to expand. You need to realize this is 100, x to the -1/2. And you start to see that this becomes routine. Are we doing a lot? Not really. This I just threw in there to see if students could do it. Make a common denominator, multiply top and bottom by 7. This is going to be 7 over 42. Multiply top and bottom by 6. It's 12 over 42, 19 over 42. Rewrite this one, surprises, I don't know why this gets students so bad, but it's 1/3 times x. This one is 15, x to the -2. So that is an overkill. I don't think any of that's too much, but we need to get that mastered. So if you're struggling with any of that, try that. And I feel like that's more than enough examples, but I'd really like to know if this video is helpful to you. Please let me know in the comments if it was helpful, or if there's something you would like to have seen me do more. So I'm trying to deal with this issue.